Hello, I'm Zaccura, and in today's video I'm going to be showing how I made my very own traveler style notebook from scratch that I'm going to be using for this year's Inktober challenge. So since I was making everything from scratch, that included the booklets of paper that were going to go inside the notebook, and that meant choosing just what kind of paper would be best for my Inktober needs. I tried out 3 different kinds of paper: smooth Bristol, Bristol vellum, and mixed media. And after much testing with inks, water, and my brand spanking new brush pen, I eventually settled on the Bristol vellum because it was nice and thick so that it would stand up to any ink washes I would do, but I also noticed that the slightly less smooth surface in comparison to the smooth Bristol allowed the inks to stick to the paper better and thus meant less lifting when erasing pencil lines under the ink, and even slightly more waterproofness when dry. Though really the difference between the 2 Bristol papers was so slight that either paper would have done just fine. Once I was done picking my paper, it was time to make the booklets. I started out with taking 4 pieces of paper and folding each one in half to crease them. Then after looking around my room for a suitable cover, I found this textured black cardstock that I felt was absolutely perfect for the Inktober theme, and I cut a piece so that it would be the same size as the rest of the pieces of paper. I didn't trim my Bristol paper at all, just simply folded them in half. So since the original size of the paper was 9 by 12 inches, the end booklets were going to be 6 by 9 inches, which is a pretty standard size book. Now, I'm not sure if all-purpose sewing machine needles were meant to be sewing through thick Bristol paper. Probably not. So I was a bit nervous to see what would happen when it came time to bind these booklets together. I racked my brain for a while trying to think of the best way to bind these booklets, and the sewing machine really felt like the best option. If I was using much thinner paper like lined paper or sketch paper, I probably would have just stapled it all together. That's what I've seen others do when making their own little sketchbooks on YouTube. But there was no way a stapler was going to go through the denseness of 4 pieces of Bristol, and the only option after that was old-fashioned hole punching and hand stitching. And considering I was literally doing this project on October 1st, that sounded like a very lengthy process that I really would have rather not do if I didn't have to. So I just changed my threads so that the top thread would be white and the bottom thread would be black to match with the paper, and put that booklet under that foot and took a breath. And woohoo! It worked! I was actually very surprised at how easily the sewing machine took it. It was really just a breeze to go through the paper. However, I do think that repetitive use in this way probably will dull the needles faster. I'm probably going to look into the best type of needle for this purpose, because really, after seeing just how easy it was to make these booklets, I'm not so sure I want to go back to buying sketchbooks. So going back to these booklets, since there are 4 weeks in a month, I decided to make 4 booklets, one for each week of October. The first 3 weeks I used 4 pieces of paper in each booklet to make a total of 8 pages, with the last week's booklet having 6 pieces of paper, creating 12 pages. This way, each week would have 1 extra page at the beginning that I could use for a little weekly cover image, and the last booklet also had 1 extra page in the back that I'm not sure what I will use for yet, but perhaps something special for the end of Inktober. Once I was finished with my 4 death notes, Once I was finished with my 4 booklets, it was time to make the cover, which was definitely the more difficult part of this project. So the two main materials I used for the cover were a piece of thick poster board for the stiffness and a piece of burlap to cover it. Believe it or not, I've actually been meaning to make myself a traveler's notebook or a Midori-style notebook ever since I discovered what it was late last year. So I already had the poster board laying around specifically for this purpose. It was the best thing I could think of to use for this purpose because it was stiff enough, but also it would allow me to sew through it. And one side was very shiny, so I'm assuming it has some kind of water resistance? I don't know. Hopefully I won't be caught in the rain with this thing either way. After doing some calculations in my head, I eventually decided the cover would be about 16 inches long and 10 inches tall. This would give some room for the spine thickness. But I wasn't too precise with everything because that's the beauty of the traveler style notebook. Nothing has to be super precise because of how customizable it is in the end. So as long as the cover was long enough to comfortably fit the booklets inside with some extra space, it was all good. The next step was to cut the burlap, and I was a little shaky because I only had one piece and there wasn't enough to make a second cover if I messed up, but I just folded it in half because I was going to wrap the entire piece of poster board in the end, and then marked it using the poster board as a template, giving myself about half an inch of seam allowance. Again, I wasn't being too precise. Part of that was because I knew that burlap has quite a lot of give because of how loosely it's woven. If I was doing this with something like cotton or cotton poly blend, I probably would be taking these calculations a bit more seriously. Now, before it was time to sew the cover up, I wanted to add some more stuff. Honestly, that's my favorite part of sewing things myself because I have the opportunity to add as many versatile pockets and other useful shenanigans that I am always deprived of when I buy stuff. I mean, why do they make jeans with fake pockets? Just, if you want to make it look like it has a pocket, then just add the darn pocket. Like, please, they're useful. So for this notebook, I wanted to add a back pocket to hold my various pens and pencils that I would be using for Inktober, and I was all set and ready to go ahead and sew my own pocket from scratch, but as I went through my scrap bin, I found some pockets that I had actually salvaged from an old pair of cargo shorts, I think, and it just so happened to be the perfect matching color as well. So that saved me a whole lot of time and work. Another reason why the fixings part of sewing is my favorite, because I salvage and save a whole lot of stuff. So pretty much every time I need something, I look through my bins and I find something perfect. And there's something really satisfying about upcycling scraps into new projects. It gives the end result so much more story and character. Plus you save money because, I mean, buying raw fabric is very expensive. I pinned and sewed the pocket to one side of the burlap, but making sure to only sew through one layer of burlap because I didn't want to close the fabric before the poster board was inside, obviously. I couldn't figure out a very neat and clean way to sew the pocket on, especially because my past self didn't leave me enough extra fabric around the edges in order to do a fold under and then top stitch situation. So instead I just sewed it as close to the pocket as I could with a very tight stitch and then cut away the extra fabric. This way it wouldn't be too ugly when the edges start fraying, which they will over time, and if anything it'll just add some more character. After that was finished, it was time to sew up the burlap, or at least sew it up 3/4 of the way. I folded the burlap in half inside out, so the pocket was on the inside, and then I pinned and sewed along the edges, but kept the top open. The bottom didn't need to be sewed because that was where it was folded in half. After that was done, I turned it back inside out, or I guess that would be outside out. Turned it to the right way. And we have a little bag thing. And into this bag goes the piece of poster board. To finish the last edge, I folded the tops of the fabric inside on itself and pinned it together and then top stitched it closed. It definitely wasn't my neatest top stitching job. The burlap was a bit difficult to work with and pin because of how stiff it is, but it's not too bad. After everything was all closed up, I top stitched all around the edge of the entire cover for extra security so that the piece of poster board inside wouldn't be moving around. And at this point, the cover was kind of finished. Almost. Not really. The main framework was finished. Now all that was left was to add a way to add the booklets inside, as well as add a closure. And that is where ye ol' handy grommet machine pincher plier thingy comes in. That's right, we're going all out on this thing. So I marked holes for 2 grommets side by side near the bottom of the spine, as well as 2 side by side near the top of the spine. How far away from the edge I put the grommets were limited to the reach of the grommet pliers, but they just so happened to be a great distance, which was about an inch or so from the edges. Now before I went ahead and poked the holes, I made sure to sew around where I was going to cut because burlap, as I mentioned previously, is very loosely woven. So to keep it from fraying and potentially ruining this entire notebook over time, I secured it by sewing it down. Then after that, I did my best to cut the holes. I didn't have an awl or anything proper readily available to cut a nice round hole, so I just struggled with various tools until the job was finished. Now, a true Midori style notebook has the closure hole in the middle of the spine. At least that's what I've seen, but my grommet pliers can't reach there, so I just did one near the middle edge of the front cover. Besides, a true Midori is made of leather and stuff anyway, so my notebook was just really Midori-inspired. The last thing to do now was to get some stretchy cord and tie them together going through the spine grommets like so. Except I didn't have any stretchy cord. Whoopsies! After furiously looking through the house, I managed to find one piece of black cord that I think came from a pair of shoes. You know how when you buy a pair of shoes, sometimes they're tied together with a stretchy band so that they don't get separated in the store? Yep, that's what I used. And after some more searching, I managed to find this gold piece of stretchy cord. Not sure about the origins of that one, but I gotta say it ended up being a really cool unplanned addition. And the piece I used for the closure was taken from a cheap notebook that I got from a dollar store a while ago, and it already had like a nice metal bar thing attached to it, so it was perfect for the closure. The concept behind a traveler's notebook or Midori style notebook is that it's really just about the cover. The cover has a bunch of bands in the center along the spine from which you can slip in booklets of paper. This is where the magic and versatility of this type of notebook comes in, because with the finished product you can easily swap out different kinds of booklets at any time. This could be lined paper, sketch paper, dotted paper, or in my case, illustration paper. So it's sort of like a continuously customized journal that never runs out of paper. And that is why I have been meaning to make myself one of these for quite a while. The finishing touch on this notebook was using some embroidery floss to stitch in the name Zig on the front cover, which ties into my theme for this year's Inktober. This year I have a character named Zig, and he's going on a journey, and along the way he's keeping a journal on the things he sees, or just feels like writing and drawing at the time. I'll talk about that more in my upcoming Inktober video, but that is basically the reveal of why I decided to make this notebook in the first place. Because it's not mine, it's Zig's. This is also actually why I chose burlap as the cover material, because I can easily stitch and remove designs on the cover, or add pins and buttons or whatever I want. So even after Inktober is over, I can still use it for all sorts of things. And after all that, the notebook was finally complete. I am honestly super happy with how this came out. I think it's super neat and I'm really excited to carry this around with me, especially because that pocket in the back literally fits everything I need for Inktober. I'm talking pencil, erasers, lining pens, gel pen, brush pen, dip pen, with nibs, water brush, colored brush pens, and I even have a little capsule of India ink in there that I can use for ink washes. I just need to make myself a little booklet with sketch paper to slip in there so that I can do thumbnail sketches. And this notebook will literally be like my entire art station, except miniaturized, and I love it. I definitely want to make more in the future, perhaps different sizes and materials, maybe even make one from leather someday. You get it, I'm hooked. But anyway, this was a great project to make, and it took me around 6 hours from start to finish, and that includes making the booklets. So I really hope some of y'all will give this a try yourselves. There's a lot of room for experimentation. You don't have to do exactly what I did. Lots of stuff you can do with this one concept. And if you do make one, tag me or let me know social media somewhere, because I would love to see what you guys come up with. But for now, that brings us to the end of this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it or found it useful in any way, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell to stay notified for when I upload. I make new videos every week, usually uploading on Sundays, but sometimes I do upload away from that schedule. If you'd like to follow me on social media, all the links to that are in the description box where you can follow me for daily updates. Best of luck to everyone who is participating in Inktober. It's a tough challenge. This is going to be my 3rd year participating, and I am probably more busy this year than I have been for the last 2 years. So I don't know how it's gonna go, but I'm gonna do my best, and I am excited to see how everyone else does. So best of luck to you, and yeah. Until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired. Always. See ya!